The first item of business is portfolio questions, and at question number 1 I call... point of order, Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I say I'm grateful that you have agreed to meet with me this evening. However, yesterday you repeated the claim in the Chamber that you had not been aware of any invitations to meet with me. The Chief Executive of the Parliament has now confirmed he had a discussion with you last Thursday about my first request to meet with you. So, on reflection of that, do you agree with the Chief Executive that you had that discussion last Thursday? And are there opportunities for you to correct the official record?
Thank you, Mr Ross. That is not a point of order, but I will respond to say that I have indeed offered to meet you later today, and I look forward to that. And I intend also to meet with Mr Finlay. Last Thursday, I told the Chief Executive that I wished to meet with Mr Finlay as a matter of priority, given the nature of events subsequent to my decision to ask you to leave the Chamber. Requests were made to meet Mr Finlay on Thursday and again on Tuesday. These were declined. Last Thursday, the Chief Executive told me that he had declined your request to meet with him, and if possible, with me, as he was aware that I was seeking to meet Mr Finlay. I therefore considered that matter closed. Your subsequent request to the Chief Executive's office to meet me on Tuesday morning was dealt with by my office, as I was unavailable due to long-standing parliamentary commitments, and I was not aware of that request.
Order.
Douglas Ross.
I'm grateful, Presiding Officer. What you have just said does now make it clear that you were aware of requests back to last Thursday. In the Chamber yesterday, you specifically said you were not aware of any requests. On reflection, because it is important to you and this entire Parliament that we give accurate statements to this Chamber, will you now correct the record from yesterday?
I would say to Mr Ross that I do not regard an email to the Chief Executive to another office, which was mentioned to me in passing, in which I am mentioned in passing, as a specific request to me to meet. My office has contacted your office today, Mr Ross, and I very much look forward to meeting you this evening. We will now move on to portfolio questions, and at question number 1, I call Emma Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with the UK Government regarding improving the process for bringing forward orders under Section 104 of the Scotland Act 1998.
Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government and the Scotland Office meet on a regular basis to discuss the Scotland Act Order Programme, and this includes ways to improve the process. Once the need for a Scotland Act order has been identified, the Scottish Government will always seek to ensure a way forward is agreed between the two governments as early as possible. Timetables for all Scotland Act orders, however, are influenced by a wide range of factors, including subject matter, complexity of drafting and securing UK parliamentary time.
Emma Roddick.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response, but I do have constituents who have been waiting a very long time for a change in the law in Scotland to allow mixed-sex marriages to convert to civil partnerships. Now, I've engaged with multiple ministers on this issue, both Scottish and UK. I've even been one of those ministers myself. And while everyone agrees the change has already been made in England, the process of getting an order seems to be unreasonably and unnecessarily long. So can the Cabinet Secretary speak any more to why this is and what can be done to expedite lawmaking for Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I agree that it has taken a lengthy time to progress with the UK Government a Section 104 order on converting marriages to civil partnerships. There is a need for a Section 104 order, for example, provisions so that a marriage that would be converted to civil partnership in Scotland would be recognised as a civil partnership in the rest of the United Kingdom. We're going to make progress. Scottish Government officials will write to the Scotland Office in the next week or so with full policy details of what needs to be included in the order. Officials will agree a timetable. Scottish Government officials will keep people interested in the order fully informed of developments, and hopefully the Scotland Office will work to ensure that all arms of the UK Government are fully engaged. More generally, the Minister for Parliamentary Business will continue to work with the Scotland Office and with the UK Government generally to ensure that Scotland Act orders are progressed smoothly and quickly, this in the interest of the people of Scotland, whatever our views are on the current devolution settlement.
Question number 2, Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had regarding its support for humanitarian assistance in light of reports of the increasing number of deaths in Gaza.
Cabinet Secretary.
Since the outset of the current conflict, the Scottish Government has contributed £1.3 million in humanitarian funding for Gaza and the wider region. This includes £750,000 through UNRWA in December 2023 and £550,000 to the Middle East through the Disasters Emergency Committee, Mercy Corps and SCIAF, which includes the further £300,000 announced just at the end of April. We receive regular briefings from UN agencies, the DEC and our Humanitarian Emergency Fund panel members. They warn of the catastrophic situation caused by the inhumane restrictions on aid imposed by Israel. WFP has enough food on the border to feed the entire population for 2 months, all while people in Gaza face starvation. This situation is utterly shameful and avoidable. The international community, including the United Kingdom, must act now.
Richard Leonard.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response? Last August, the Cabinet Secretary met with Israeli government representatives. Last October, Israel banned the UN aid organisation UNRWA. Last November, an arrest warrant was issued for Benjamin Netanyahu for the war crimes of starvation as a method of warfare. Netanyahu and Donald Trump have handed over food aid in Gaza to private contractors, whilst blocking humanitarian aid from any other source. In just the last few days, scores of Palestinians have been killed and injured by Israeli forces whilst waiting for food from the US-owned Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So will the Cabinet Secretary today condemn the privatisation and militarisation of humanitarian aid in Gaza, back the reinstatement of UN agencies to provide all aid, support an immediate ceasefire, pledge that his government will enforce the ICC arrest warrant and support an immediate ban on arms sales to Israel?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I agree with Richard Leonard on all the points that he's made and would make the point to him that these are concerns that were raised by the First Minister in his recent meeting with the Prime Minister. There's more that the international community can do, but what is happening on the ground in Gaza at the present time is absolutely horrific and avoidable. The United Nations and its agencies, including UNRWA, are those who should be taking forward the humanitarian supply of the population in Gaza. This should not go on, the privatisation that he has and militarisation that he has raised in the chamber, and a ceasefire should be immediately respected by the Israelis.
Stephen Kerr.
If I can just swing our attention back to areas that the Cabinet Secretary is responsible for. We've learned in evidence sessions in the Constitution, External Affairs and Culture Committee that a significant proportion of Scottish Government aid to Gaza is being distributed on the ground in the form of cash or vouchers. Now, in the light of the grave concerns that there is about Hamas control in the region, can the Cabinet Secretary provide us with any assurance, can he tell us what checks are in place to guarantee that Scottish taxpayers' money that's intended to help people that are in great distress is not being diverted to fund a proscribed terrorist organisation that is responsible for terrible, awful atrocities?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would have thought that Mr Kerr is aware that no aid is being distributed on the ground in Gaza at the moment, apart from the privatised and militarised organisation that Mr Leonard brought up. I would have thought that Mr Kerr would be aware of that. It's leading the news today and has been leading the news. I have answered the question. No aid is being distributed on the ground. If he's got any further specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I would have thought Mr Kerr would be better informed about the situation on the ground at the present time.
Question number 3 is not lodged. Question number 4, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when the Constitutional Secretary last met and will next meet the UK Government Ministers.
Cabinet Secretary.
On the 30th of May, I met the Right Honourable Nick Thomas-Symonds, the Minister for the Cabinet Office, Paymaster General and Minister for the Constitution and European Union Relations. This followed our previous meeting on the 20th of May, in which we discussed announcements arising from the EU-UK summit. These included a common understanding detailing policy measures both sides committed to as we take the new strategic partnership forward, a joint statement setting out UK-EU cooperation across global issues and committing to annual leader-level summits, and a security and defence partnership which will formalise UK-EU foreign policy cooperation, allowing for greater collaboration on defence industry work. Currently, I have no planned meetings with the UK ministers.
David Torrance.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Labour said many things before they came to power, but as we know, their performance in government has been found wanting. They spoke about the reset and a better cooperation between the UK and the Scottish Government, but they are content to keep the Tories' Internal Market Act. They refused to share draft text with devolved governments before its agreement with the UK, and they sold out our fishing communities. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, isn't this a case that this reset is just another broken electoral pledge made to the people of Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government continues to seek a principled and a pragmatic approach to engagement with the UK Government, and the current relationship with the UK Government is more productive and constructive than it was with its predecessor. However, areas of significant concern remain, most notably in relation to information sharing and substantive discussion around significant developments such as the US trade deal and the EU reset deal, which were both announced without sufficient engagement with the devolved governments. There are also a number of areas in which the UK Government is falling short in its commitment to resetting intergovernmental relations by failing to take into account the needs of Scotland on work such as eradicating child poverty, migration and the Internal Market Act review. It's imperative that information sharing and engagement with the Scottish Government is both sustained and meaningful to maximise the potential for positive outcomes for the people of Scotland.
Joe Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. When the Cabinet Secretary next meets UK ministers, will he raise with them the opportunity to develop another tranche of City Deal projects? This is something recommended in the recent report by the Economy and Fair Work Committee. I don't know if the Cabinet Secretary has had the opportunity to visit Perth Museum, which I paid another visit to just a couple of weeks ago. A tremendous project, now with visitor numbers substantially exceeding projections, funded through the Tay Cities deal, and there is an opportunity for many more such cultural projects in future if such a new tranche could be provided.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think I'm right in saying the Perth Museum has been shortlisted for an award, which I'm sure all of us would welcome, and I look forward to going and taking up the members' invitation. On the City Deal programme, this is something that I think I'm right in saying the Deputy First Minister leads on, but I'm happy to take the encouragement from him to share with her, and if it is on the agenda for next meetings that I have with relevant UK Government ministers, I'd be happy to report back to him in future portfolio questions.
Question number 5, Elena Whittam.
To ask the Scottish Government what its assessment is of the impact of the Maldent project on oral health policy in Malawi.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Maldent project has transformed oral health in Malawi. The country faces a severe oral health crisis with 9 public dentists to serve a population of 22 million people. Supported by Scottish Government investment, Maldent has spearheaded the creation of Malawi's first dental degree programme, and we celebrate the recent graduation of Malawi's first home-trained dentists, a direct outcome of Maldent, with a further 137 students currently studying dentistry. Maldent has also developed Malawi's first national oral health policy, establishing a crucial blueprint for effective oral health interventions, with key focus on preventing oral disease, especially in children.
Elena Whittam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Can I ask him what plans the Scottish Government has to build on this groundbreaking international development work? And does the Cabinet Secretary share my view that Scotland must take every opportunity to show the world that we are a good global citizen, a nation that wants to play its part in the global community, and that the international engagement of these islands does not begin and end at the behest of Westminster?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I can give her the assurance that we remain steadfast in our commitment to supporting our partner countries and others through international development and climate justice funding, while also responding to global humanitarian crises as a responsible, compassionate and good global citizen. We're building on the Maldent project's success to deepen our institutional ties with Malawi in higher education. This commitment stems from a long-standing partnership with the university since 2005, and we're dedicated to fostering these long-term institutional collaborations. These include strengthening governance and infrastructure at the university, supporting the dental surgery programme and investing in faculty development.
Paul O'Kane.
Thank you, Thank you, Presiding Officer. On Saturday, we received the sad news of the passing of Councillor Betty Cunningham, former Provost of East Renfrewshire, who is known to many across all sides of this chamber and described as a force of nature. Among her many achievements, Betty was responsible for setting up an international trust after visiting Kaponda in Malawi in 2007, and the trust has supported the provision of education, healthcare, skills and agriculture opportunities, as well as taking hundreds of young people on cultural exchanges to Malawi. One of the key areas of interest, of course, was oral health. So can the Cabinet Secretary say how the Government is partnering with charitable organisations such as the Betty Cunningham Trust on projects like Maldent? And does he agree that continuing such partnerships is a fitting legacy to people like Betty, who had such love for and connection with Malawi?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, may I commend Paul O'Kane for bringing up this question and putting on record his condolences, which I share, to the family, friends and colleagues of Betty Cunningham, the former Provost of East Renfrewshire. Her long commitment to supporting projects in Malawi were widely recognised. This includes her receipt of an OBE for services to Renfrewshire and to Malawi. And I would wish to pay particular tribute to the Betty Cunningham International Trust, which she established, which built a health clinic and nursery at schools. I think there's much to commend her for her lifetime of work and commitment, both for the people of Renfrewshire and of Malawi.
Question number 6, Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will propose the scheduling of time for a parliamentary debate or statement on the works at Union Bridge on the A96 in Keith, in light of the ongoing delays that have resulted in the trunk road being reduced to one lane with traffic lights for almost a year.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There are no plans at this time to propose a Scottish Government debate or a statement on this issue. But as the member knows, any proposals for Government business in Parliament are subject to consideration by the Bureau and then approval by the Parliament. Chamber time is limited in the coming weeks, but there are many other routes to scrutinise the activities of the Government. That includes general questions, transport portfolio questions and topical questions.
Douglas Ross.
The Minister will be aware that I have tried. There have been no opportunities for supplementaries at transport questions for understandable reasons. My attempt to have a FMQ on this about a month ago were not selected because of the demands the Presiding Officer has to deal with. But this is an issue that has now been ongoing in Keith for almost a year. I've now asked twice for the Cabinet Secretary for Transport to come to Keith and hear from residents and businesses about the impact these roadworks are having. Will the Minister, who I previously presented a petition to on this issue back in December, take the strongest possible representation to Fiona Hislop to come to Keith to hear about what is happening in the town as a result of these long ongoing works?
Minister.
I'm slightly confused because I thought this was about the workings of the parliamentary session. However, if Mr Ross wishes me to convey his message to Fiona Hislop, I will endeavour to do so.
Thank you. Question number 7, Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it has any further plans to widen its review into Creative Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I agreed the remit of the review of Creative Scotland with the Independent Chair Angela Leach, and it was published on the Scottish Government's website last month. The review will consider Creative Scotland's purpose, its functions, its structure and partnerships, and as well as its governance and leadership, its performance and finances and distribution of funds. The review is independent of the Scottish Government and will deliver its recommendations in November.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you. 2 weeks ago, the Scottish Government announced that the review into Creative Scotland would be widened to include the Quangos leadership, performance and funding schemes. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm if the review will take account of funding decisions made in the current financial year, and does he accept that the review's outcomes will be essential to prevent another rain fiasco?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I confirmed in my answer to Sharon Dowie that the review is independent of the Scottish Government, so it's not for me, beyond the remit, which I have agreed with its chair, to point her to issues which should or shouldn't be looked into. I'm sure she will look very closely at the record in relation to the question that the member has raised, and no doubt she will be giving evidence at some stage to the Scottish Parliament where these sort of questions can be asked. I would also point out to Sharon Dowie that I have taken every opportunity to encourage members and the wider cultural and arts communities to please take part in this review, and I would encourage for her to raise her concerns directly with the independent review.
Emma Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A vital part of safeguarding our cultural wealth and heritage is ensuring that we can effectively promote Scotland's creative talent and showcase that to the rest of the world. Can the Cabinet Secretary say any more about how the Scottish Government is supporting Creative Scotland and the culture sector through increased funding in the 2025-26 Scottish Budget?
Cabinet Secretary.
We've demonstrated our commitment to the culture sector with an increase of over £34 million in 2025-26. This takes us to over £50 million more in culture funding than in 23-24 and includes an additional £4 million for festivals. This will support our commitment to both double the Expo Festival Fund and expanding its reach across Scotland beyond festivals in Edinburgh and Glasgow. We continue to help artists access new markets, building business relationships and promoting Scotland's culture sector internationally through the Scottish Government's network of international offices. As part of our international culture strategy, we've committed to carrying out a feasibility study into the establishment of a support service for cultural export and exchange, and this will help to inform how we can best support international activity in the sector to overcome challenges to it.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last month, it was announced that the review into Creative Scotland would be widened. As the Cabinet Secretary will be aware, the review was originally announced in September last year. It has taken the Scottish Government over 8 months to widen this review. When did the Cabinet Secretary realise that the remit of this review needed to be expanded? And how much is the expansion of the remit likely to increase the cost of the review by?
Cabinet Secretary.
I don't expect any increase in costs for the review. I thought it was important that the independent reviewer was able to look at all relevant areas, and if Mr Chowdhury believes that there are particular issues which need to be raised with her as part of that review process, I would encourage him and colleagues, as I've already said to Sharon Dowie, to do so. I think it's in all our interests and that of the cultural sector that this review is as best informed as it can be. So if he has any needs, interests, concerns or expectations that he wants to raise directly, I would encourage him to do so.
Question number 8, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the economic importance of festivals to local communities.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government recognises that festivals and events are vital to local economies, especially community-led ones with strong social and cultural value. The economic importance of festivals in every part of Scotland has been best described by the festivals themselves, from Orkney's St Magnus Festival adding £1.3 million to the local economy each year, to Wigton Book Festival generating an estimated £4.3 million annually. The importance that government places on festivals is underlined by the number of festivals receiving support from Creative Scotland's multi-year funding programme and our commitment to work with festivals across the country through a strategic partnership.
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response and indeed the acknowledgement of the St Magnus Festival's significance. Let me turn his attention to another local festival in Orkney, the internationally renowned Orkney Folk Festival, which earlier this month proved to be another huge success with record-breaking ticket sales and an economic impact now estimated around £1 million. I'd like to congratulate organisers, volunteers and performers for their part in that success and probably declare an interest, as my brother has played a part, I think, in all three categories over the years. But concerns have been raised about the lack of support available through Events Scotland, where funding appears to be limited to 3 years with a focus on growing and/or new events. The Cabinet Secretary will recognise that island festivals perhaps have a more limited capacity to grow and that sustainability is far more important. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to speak to Events Scotland and see if there's a way of ensuring that the way in which funding is allocated can be island-proofed in accordance with the Islands Act?
Let's keep our questions and responses concise. Cabinet Secretary.
I'll try my best. Firstly, can I say to Liam MacArthur, I understand the point that he's making about continuity. That's why multi-annual year funding has been brought in through Creative Scotland, but he raises an issue specific to the Orkney Folk Festival, which I will look closely at, and I would join him in congratulating the organisers, the volunteers, the performers and indeed his brother. He asks me to raise the matter that he has highlighted with Events Scotland, and I'm content that I'll do that, and I will get back to him on the points that he's raised.
I have 3 supplementaries from members, and if we can keep these concise, we'll fit them in. Ben McPherson.
Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that local events like the Leith Festival, the North Edinburgh Community Festival and the New Haven Gala and other similar gatherings around the country play such an important role in promoting small businesses, supporting artists and community groups, and also helping to foster a sense of community cohesion and pride?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think Ben Macpherson is absolutely right to raise events in Edinburgh North and Leith, and I would add the Meadows Festival to that list in Edinburgh Central. Other festivals are, of course, available throughout the rest of the country, and the Scottish Government is committed to supporting a thriving music industry in Scotland, including grassroots music venues, which are key for emerging Scottish talent. 77% of multi-year funding recipients are presenting organisations focusing on exhibitions, on events and performances, underlining an emphasis on supporting local platforms right across Scotland.
Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The future of the Knockengorroch Festival, which is billed as Scotland's oldest greenfield festival, hangs in the balance due to financial pressures of running costs of over $320,000 in recent years. So what action is the Cabinet Secretary taking to ensure that these vital festivals within Scotland's regions are allowed to thrive and survive?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think I've given pretty detailed background in terms of the Scottish Government's commitment to funding and events. For reasons which Liam MacArthur raised about continuity of funding, that is one particular challenge that we've been aware of in a number of festivals in Scotland. I'd be content to take the particular case that he raises with me away to have conversations with officials about that and undertake to write back to him. I want to support the footprint of festivals and events right across Scotland, including that which he has raised this afternoon.
And Neil Bibby.
Edinburgh's festivals are of course vital to Edinburgh's economy and Scotland's status as a cultural hub, but recently venues have reported the high costs of accommodation are resulting in performers restricting their time at the Edinburgh Fringe. Would the Cabinet Secretary discuss further extending ScotRail running hours to Glasgow and the West during the festivals with ministerial colleagues such as Mr Fairley and the Transport Secretary to ensure more people can attend, more performers can access cheaper accommodation and to spread the economic benefits of Edinburgh's festivals across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think Neil Bibby makes a really good point, and that's why I initiated and set up the strategic partnerships with festivals, because these kind of issues are much more important than having just one meeting. It's one that should take place regularly. I have begun to do so. And the issue of transport is one of the first issues that has been raised, one which I have sought to explore the kind of solutions that he's outlined. And I can tell him I've already had a bilateral meeting with the Transport Secretary to discuss this. So he's absolutely right. We want to make sure that the benefit of festivals in one part of the country can be shared throughout the rest of the country, and indeed access to that festival can be accessed, and we're working in partnership with festivals right across Scotland to make sure that we do that.
That concludes the point of order. Stephen Kerr.
Presiding Officer, after 4 years in this place as a member of the Scottish Parliament, I am coming to you this afternoon after that question session to ask specifically, what do I have to do as a backbench member of this Parliament to get ministers to answer questions under scrutiny? And the reason I ask this is because yesterday we had a long debate in this chamber about the breakdown of trust between the Scottish people and this institution, and that should concern all of us. Today I asked the Cabinet Secretary a very straightforward question. Over the last 18 months, the Scottish Government has sent £1.5 million to Gaza by one route or another. And I asked a very simple question. Could the Cabinet Secretary give undertakings to this chamber that that money had not fallen into the wrong hands, but instead what we got, frankly, was sanctimony? And I think it's about time, if I may be as bold, Presiding Officer, that, and I ask you to do this on behalf of all of us in this Parliament, that ministers were expected to give some semblance of an answer to a question that is asked of them in this Parliament.
Thank you, Mr Kerr. The content of members' contributions is not generally a matter for the Chair. It is, of course, the case that the Ministerial Code requires that full and frank responses are given to members of this Parliament. There will be a brief pause before we move on to the next item, which is questions on justice and home affairs.
Okay, the next portfolio is Justice and Home Affairs. Question number 1 not lodged. Question number 2, Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to modernise family law and ensure the efficient functioning of the civil court system.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government is taking a variety of steps to modernise family law and ensure the efficient functioning of the civil court system. For example, we recently laid commencement regulations to commence some further provisions of the Children's Scotland Act 2020. We plan to make further commencement regulations later this year and intend to lay SSIs on the regulation of child contact services. We have also convened a working group on child welfare reporters to consider how the current system is working in practice and what is needed for the new register of child welfare reporters.
Emma Harper.
Thank the Minister for that answer. As things stand within our court service, there are no meaningful penalties that can be dispensed by sheriffs in cases where one party to a case is purposely engaged in delaying tactics for their own gain. Can the Minister advise if work is in hand to amend the rules and guidance around civil cases to allow parties to a case engaged in such behaviour, and in particular in cases of family dispute involving children, is there a potential to sanction or subject to sanction where needed for the proper functioning of the courts?
Minister.
Firstly, delay in child contact proceedings is not in the child's best interest. We plan to make further commencement regulations later this year in relation to the Children's Scotland Act 2020, including Section 32, which requires the court to consider how delays in contact cases can have a negative impact on the child's welfare. Case management rules for family actions in the Sheriff Court came into effect in September 2023, and these are intended to help prevent undue delay in proceedings relating to the welfare of children. If a party to a case considers another party is causing unnecessary delay, they can raise this with the Sheriff, and I recognise the negative effect that non-compliance with contact orders can have on a child. Where somebody believes another person has not obeyed a court order, they can ask the court to vary the order to hold the person in contempt of court. There is a provision on penalties for contempt of court in Section 15 of the Contempt of Court Act 1981, including a fine or imprisonment. And conducting proceedings in this manner amounting to an abuse of process may also involve contempt of court and a result in penalty. And in addition, Presiding Officer, it is open to the court to use its power to regulate the expenses arising from the court action to penalise a party for their conduct in the course of proceedings.
Briefly, Liam Kerr.
One of the biggest hindrances to the efficient functioning of the civil court system is the lack of availability of legal aid solicitors. Now, one woman seeking a legally aided divorce unsuccessfully approached 116 different law firms, whilst Women's Aid Orkney report difficulty securing legal aid has forced some women to stay in harmful relationships. Now, the Minister's earlier script had a list of inputs, but what are the outputs that she commits to which will alleviate legal aid problems? And will they be achieved before the end of 2025?
Minister.
Thank you. So I think, as Mr Kerr might know, the Scottish Government does recognise that reform is needed in the legal aid system. There was a paper that I published in February that goes into the exact details of what we're trying to achieve before the Holyrood elections next year. And I can send that to Mr Kerr if he hasn't read that. But in the short term, we have identified priority changes as we believe this will impact positively on the users and providers to bridge the gap between the current system and the future one in line with our reform objectives and expected benefits. This is the first stage in a long journey towards a more strategic, focused and managed legal aid system, including a framework for decision-making. So we are keen to hear views from all those across the justice system, including yourself, on areas of reform and on matters of prioritisation.
Thank you. Question 3, Pam Gosal.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the rollout of the Caledonian system. Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Caledonian system is currently delivered in 21 of the 32 local authority areas, covering over 70% of the population. The Scottish Government is committed to rolling the Caledonian system out further, and by the end of this year, 2 more areas, Shetland and Angus, will begin training to deliver the Caledonian system, taking this up to 23 areas. The Scottish Government has just written to all local authorities detailing a change to the funding distribution. These letters also provide details of a £1.4 million increase in the Caledonian funding line, and we will also be engaging with all local areas to provide central support and training for those areas wishing to move to deliver the Caledonian system.
Pam Gossel.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Rehabilitation is key to preventing reoffending. That is why my Prevention of Domestic Abuse Scotland Bill would increase the uptake of rehabilitation courses for domestic abusers. The SNP's 2021 manifesto said they would also increase work to change the attitudes of offenders by ensuring that the Caledonian project is available nationwide. However, the Government now says it has been rolled out in only 21 out of 32 local authorities, with just 2 more expected by the end of the year. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the access to rehabilitation programmes like the Caledonian should be guaranteed and available everywhere in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I certainly do agree with the value and the importance of the Caledonian programme. It is important to recognise that some local authorities use other programmes. The importance that I place on the Caledonian system is demonstrated by the increase in funding for this budgetary year, whereby that means £10 million over 2 years. We're also supporting local authorities in improving the IT so that there are other risk assessment tools attached to the programme, such as the spousal assault risk assessment tool as well, and that we will continue to support the rollout of the Caledonian system, notwithstanding that local authorities in some areas have chosen to use other programmes.
Briefly, Pauline McNeill.
I believe it's time to focus on the attitudes of boys to women and girls as a way of recognising that early intervention is the key to long-term reduction in violence and domestic abuse. So does the Cabinet Secretary agree? I'm sure she's at least heard of the Gareth Southgate intervention lecture, which I thought was very good, where he talks about the manipulative and toxic influences that are contributing to causing harm to young men, and therefore does she agree that it's imperative to revise existing school programmes to focus on boys and their attitude to women and girls, complex though it is, to ensure that we have a real chance of reducing violence against women and girls in our society?
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary, as briefly as possible.
Yes, in short, I do agree with that. And if I can give 2 examples, there is work led by the Children's Minister and the Minister for Community Safety around online harems, and in terms of the endeavours that are led by the Education Secretary, attendance, behaviour and the curriculum is crucially important, and equally safe and relationships education is an important part of that.
Question 4, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that the number of serious assaults committed by teenagers has increased in the last 5 years.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I am of course concerned about any reports of increases in violence. Whilst Police Scotland have advised the total number of serious assaults by 11 to 18-year-olds fell 27% between 2019-20 and 2024-25, there has also been an increase in serious cases within schools from 6 to 40. Our approach to tackling violence amongst young people is focused on education programmes on the unacceptability of violence, effective punishment for offences, appropriate police powers and sustained school and community engagement with young people. And I'm also pleased to say, to show our continued commitment to tackling violence, I have increased funding to the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit by 7% this year, so that total funding will now be in excess of £1.2 million.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Serious assaults by teenagers continues to rise. The number of children possessing knives is up 15% among the 11 to 15-year-olds and 14% among 16 to 18-year-olds. In recent weeks, we've seen police call to a primary school to deal with a child carrying a knife, and a 16-year-old tragically lost their life on Irvine Beach after a fatal stabbing by another teenager. The SNP's soft-touch approach to justice clearly isn't working. Therefore, Cabinet Secretary, is it not time to back the Scottish Conservative calls for more stop-and-search powers to tackle the epidemic of youth violence?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it is important to recognise that while there has been demonstrable progress in the reduction of crime and violence, including an offending behaviour by young people, I appreciate that that will be of no comfort to victims and to families, and that progress is not always felt in communities. And therefore it is important that we acknowledge recent concerns and recent changes in the behaviour of some young people, because it's important to recognise that most young people are indeed law-abiding citizens. I can say with respect, he can keep his soft-touch rhetoric. What I'm interested in is in the evidence about what works for now and in the future. I'm not interested in revisiting debates of the past on interventions that have not worked. And in terms of stop-and-search powers, I am strongly of the view that police have adequate powers in that area, in that they do use stop and search and have successfully extracted 900 weapons from citizens, 200 of which have been from young people.
I'm going to need a bit more brevity in both the questions and the responses. Briefly, Ben McPherson.
It's well understood that good youth work and innovative initiatives can have a positive impact on young people who may be engaged in violence or drawn into it. Therefore, can the Scottish Government advise when the next Youth Violence Summit will take place and say more about what urgent action will be taken to expand prevention measures and early intervention?
And as briefly as possible, Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the next Youth Summit will take place in the next week or so. That will have a particular focus on the value of youth work interventions. The Scottish Government will continue to invest in interventions that are successful in terms of engaging and educating our young people, and I hope we have demonstrated through our ongoing commitment and recent announcement that the Minister made around cash back for communities. And there is also other interventions such as the Quit Lichen for Fights campaign as well.
Question 5, Douglas Lumsden.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide further detail regarding the reasons why it's not planning a broader review of the statutory grounds for fatal accident inquiries, in light of the previous review of statutory grounds being undertaken nearly a decade ago and reports of growing public concern over preventable deaths outside of custody settings.
Secretary.
Presiding Officer, a focused review in relation to deaths in custody was commissioned in January of this year in order to allow a swift response to the recommendations for improvements to be made to the fatal accident system as it relates to death in custody.
Douglas Lumsden.
The question was concerning deaths outside of custody settings, because in 2019, Aberdeen father and Good Samaritan Alan Geddes was murdered by a man released from prison just hours earlier. In 2023, the Mental Welfare Commission released its damning report highlighting a list of failures in the run-up to the release of Stuart Quinn. And if government agencies had acted differently, the outcome could have been different. Alan's sister, Sandra, continues to fight for answers, and this case is crying out for a fatal accident inquiry. So would the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that when someone commits murder just hours after release from prison, there has obviously been failures and the criteria for a statutory FAI must be widened to cover these situations?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I know that Mr Lumsden has been a keen advocate on behalf of his constituent Sandra Geddes, who I had the pleasure of meeting as a result of an intervention from Mr Lumsden when the Bail and Release Bill was going through Parliament, and there was a number of changes at that time in and around through care standards and legislation, and of course the imperative nature of good release planning. Whilst the current review that I have commissioned is focused on deaths in custody, I should say to Mr Lumsden that any wider learning points from the review will be given due consideration in a broader context also.
Supplementary, Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary assure me that the Sheriff Abercrombie-led independent review of the system of FAIs into deaths in prison custody will meet and engage with families to hear directly about their personal experiences?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it will be for Sheriff Abercrombie, the independent chair, to decide how to conduct the review. But I know from meeting with him prior to his taking up appointment that engaging with families and learning from their experience will be central to the review. And of course, the terms of reference that I set have to include the effectiveness, efficiency and the trauma-informed nature of investigations into deaths in custody.
Question 6, Mark Russell.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on using the powers outlined in the International Criminal Court Scotland Act 2001 to prosecute nationals and residents of the UK residing in Scotland who have committed war crimes.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, while it is crucial that Scotland has the ability to prosecute international crimes within the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, any decision to initiate proceedings against any individual is a matter for independent operational partners and not for the Scottish Government to comment upon.
Mark Ruskell.
Presiding Officer, I think what we're seeing now on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, coming from Gaza is evidence of war crimes being committed by members of the Israeli Defence Force. Given that the Metropolitan Police War Crimes Unit have received a dossier of evidence that accuses 10 British citizens of committing war crimes, including the targeted killing of civilians and aid workers, what action can the Scottish Government do to ensure that the provisions of this Act are followed through in Scotland and we can ensure the safety of our communities when faced with potentially war criminals living amongst us?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as I hope the member appreciates, that the Scottish Government is a firm believer in the rule of law, both domestically and in terms of internationally. The International Criminal Court has 4 international obligations around war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide and other powers in relation to aggression. As a government, we support any investigation into crimes against humanity and genocide, and the International Court of Justice has insisted that Israel take all steps to prevent the crime of genocide and has ordered Israel to ensure access to this crime can be investigated by relevant UN bodies. And as the member will appreciate, decisions on prosecution in terms of Scotland are of course for the Lord Advocate, and of course the Crown Office would require reports to be received by a reporting agency to make any further considerations.
Question 7, Rose McCall.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government, in relation to its commitment that no young person under the age of 18 should be imprisoned, what discussions it has had with the Scottish Sentencing Council regarding reviewing the sentencing of young people guidelines, which states that all sentencing options, including imprisonment, remain open to the court.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, decisions on sentencing are for the independent courts. Custody is available as a disposal when the person sentenced is under 25 years of age. The Children, Care and Justice Scotland Act 2024 also permits the use of custodial sentences for under 18s. And while the sentenced person is under 18, their sentence cannot be served in a young offenders institution and is instead served in age-appropriate settings like secure accommodation. If a sentence for an individual extends beyond their turning 18, the remainder of that sentence would be served in a young offenders institution and prison as appropriate.
Rose McCall.
Thank you. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. The public expect absolute clarity on what steps can be taken in the criminal justice system to bring the most serious offenders to justice, regardless of their age. And this was confirmed by the First Minister's answer to my colleague Russell Finlay on the 22nd of May, when he reiterated that it remains open to prosecutors to prosecute a young person if they have committed a serious offence. So given the ongoing capacity crisis that we have in our secure accommodation, where the judicial system could be forced to send young offenders because there's simply nowhere else to put them, will the Cabinet Secretary give more clarity to both the Scottish Sentencing Council and to this Parliament on the precise criteria for sending a young person to prison? And how does this interact with their cast-iron commitment not to imprison anyone under the age of 18 as enshrined by law?
Presiding Officer, the legal route to placing under 18s into prisons or young offenders institutions was closed by this Parliament, so there is no legal route to send young people to prison. But I hope I can reassure the member by saying that the budget for this Parliament includes additional resource up to £8.5 million to support the placements of children sentenced or remanded. But of course, investment in preventing children coming into contact with the criminal justice system remains a priority, whether that's through the allocation of resources from cashback or the whole family wellbeing fund.
Briefly, Katie Clark.
I agree that no young person under 18 should be in prison. However, we need to ensure there are adequate numbers of places in secure units for justice referrals. We've seen a change in the profile of young people in secure units in recent decades, with, for example, larger numbers of young women there for non-justal disposals, for example, concern about self-harming. So what work is the Cabinet Secretary doing across government to ensure that there are an adequate number of the 78 places available for justice referrals?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, this is an important area of work that involves Justice Ministers along with Education Ministers. As I said, we have increased budget, not just to pay for the placements of children sentenced to other responsibilities of Ministers, but also those children who are on remand, who would normally be funded by local authorities. We have taken that on board. There is also, in terms of increasing capacity, 4 fully funded new secure beds in Rossi. And it is, we are committed to increasing resourcing when beds become available, to ensuring that they are part of a contract to ensure that we have the facilities available for our children.
And question 8, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on funding for the Cashback for Communities programme.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The commitment to a further 3-year phase of Cashback for Communities programme was included in the Programme for Government 2025 to 2026. To support programme delivery, up to £26 million will be made available. This is an increase of £6 million from the current phase. The programme is funded by money recovered through the Proceeds of Crime Act and supports young people at risk of becoming involved in antisocial behaviour, offending or re-offending. Information relating to the programme is available on the Cashback for Communities website, and the programme is open to applications on Thursday, June the 12th.
Willie Coffey.
Thank the Minister for that answer. It's crucial that young people at risk of being drawn into criminal activity have access to support and to projects like Cashback for Communities. Can the Minister just say some more about the impact of the investment into violence prevention for my communities in Kilmarnock and Irvine Valley and for those across Scotland?
Minister.
Thank you. We have invested over £6 million since 2023 for the delivery of a range of activities through the Violence Prevention Framework. And this includes the work of the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit, Medics Against Violence and Youth Link Scotland's No Knives, Better Lives, and also the delivery of the Mentors in Violence Prevention programme in schools throughout the whole of Scotland. Some of this work is being delivered in Ayrshire, including the delivery of the hospital navigators at Cross House Hospital Emergency Department, and extending this approach into the police custody suite as well. This investment seeks to help prevent violence, reduce its harm and ultimately improve outcomes for young people and communities throughout Scotland. The Cashback for Communities programme is also having an impact on young people in the area, and the latest report covering 2023 to 2024 shows that 197 young people in East Ayrshire were supported through 7 local cashback projects.
Thank you. A brief supplementary, Sharon Dowie.
Thank you. At the Criminal Justice Committee, we heard from Police Scotland, who said they would like to see some of the money recovered through proceeds of crime returned to them, as it does in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. They said they see real benefit in being able to do that because you can turn that money back to deal with the type of crime that you're facing. And they also said it sends a strong message to criminals that their money is now going to fund the officers who will chase them and their fellow offenders down. We do support money going back to communities, but has the Minister considered some of the proceeds for this?
Minister.
Yes, thank you. The police budget, the Scottish budget, has been increased this year by £90 million, and we have committed the £26 million for the Cashback Communities to be reinvested into our youth programmes across the whole of the 32 local authorities in Scotland.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes portfolio questions on Justice and Home Affairs. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next portfolio. Okay, the next portfolio is education and skills, and at question number 1, I call Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. To ask the last thing. There we go. Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with UHI Perth in relation to its funding position.
Mr Graham Day.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Funding Council has statutory responsibility for oversight of higher and further education institutions in Scotland. In turn, Perth College is assigned to the University of the Highlands and Islands as the regional strategic body. Therefore, the SFC has been working with UHI and Perth College to address some of the issues there. For example, the Scottish Funding Council has been working with the College and UHI on the interim appointments of senior staff.
Murdo Fraser.
Can I thank the Minister for his response? Perth College UHI plays a vital role in the economy and the community of Perthshire, yet faces serious financial challenges with a £2 million deficit. A principal who has just stepped down following the collapse of air service training, a long-established aviation training arm, leading to staff redundancies and a loss of student places. And the college is now having to consider scrapping degree courses. This is a crisis, Minister, made worse by the top slicing of the college budget to fund the executive office functions of the UHI in Inverness. So what is the Scottish Government doing to help before we see further redundancies and course closures?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, I want to... The issue about top slicing, as Murdo Fraser refers to it, he may or may not be aware of an extensive piece of work that's been conducted by UHI in conjunction with all of its constituent parts to look at what a future long-term sustainable model will be for UHI. And I would like to think that Murdo Fraser, like I, are committed to UHI as a concept and a long-term future there. I recognise the issues that he describes, financial challenges at Perth. What I can say to him is that the SFC and UHI have been working extensively and closely with that institution over a sustained period of time. And I'll be happy to ask both of them to engage with them if they've not done so already, to give them a fuller understanding of what that looks like. I recognise that these have been difficult and challenging times for the staff and for the students at the institution. But I would point to the fact that UHI now have in place an interim highly respected and experienced acting principal and a very highly regarded interim finance director, and I would be optimistic that things will progress from here.
Very brief supplementary, Colin Beattie.
Universities and colleges like UHI Perth are facing increasing external pressure as a result of hostile UK Government policies, namely on immigration and the rise in employer national insurance contributions. The sector has been vocal about its concerns, so can the Minister speak to the potential impact Labour's immigration crackdown could have on our higher education sector?
Briefly.
Presiding Officer, there is absolutely no doubt that the proposals that we have seen come forward in the last couple of weeks are causing considerable consternation within the higher and further education sectors. And of course, this comes on top of the employer national insurance contribution bombshell that was dropped in it. And that's why the Scottish Government is seeking changes in the space of graduate visa routes so that we can have a bespoke arrangement for Scotland that meets its needs.
Question 2 was not lodged. Question 3, Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what support it is providing to teachers to help deal with behaviour in classrooms.
Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
In August, the Scottish Government published our joint action plan with COSLA on relationships and behaviours in schools. The first progress report setting out action taken between November 23 and March 25 was published at the end of March. This showed progress had been made against all 20 of the actions contained within the plan. In the coming weeks, we will be publishing new guidance to support schools to foster a positive and inclusive and safe school environment, including in terms of the use of consequences. We will also be publishing new guidance on developing risk assessments for violent, aggressive or dangerous behaviour.
Alec Rowley.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Teacher workload unfair and unhealthy. That's the headline this week coming from an EIS survey. It is clear that we need less class contact time for teachers. It must be reduced. More ASN teachers more teachers in general in our classrooms, as was promised, smaller class sizes. Does the Cabinet Secretary not realise that these are the key actions that need to be taken if we are to address the issues that we have within our classrooms?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Mr Riley for raising an important issue in relation to the EIS survey, and I look forward, of course, to addressing their AGM tomorrow at their conference in Aviemore. In relation to reducing class contact, he will know that a key condition of the budget was that substantive progress was made in relation to that aim. I think it is absolutely pivotal to creating the headspace needed, for example, in terms of driving reform. He will also know the budget provided extra funding to councils like Fife in relation to teacher numbers and in relation to additional support needs. And I have to observe, Presiding Officer, that Labour Party took the decision to abstain on that budget.
Number of supplementaries. I'll try to get them all in. First, Rose McCall.
The Cabinet Secretary mentioned the Scottish Government's action plan from August of last year, but in that time there has been over 3,000 violent behaviour incidents reported in schools in Fife alone. And we know that teachers are having to dedicate increased time to dealing with challenging incidents, dealing with the failure or the lack of support from mainstreaming pupils and the up-and-coming changes in the Education Bill. And it's simply too much for many of our dedicated teaching professionals, of which many are contemplating leaving the profession. So in the update, can the Scottish Government give an idea of the effectiveness of this plan from last summer, particularly in the light of increasing expectations on our teachers?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Ross McCall for raising this point, and I have to say, Presiding Officer, she has consistently raised issues in relation to Fife, and we have discussed this, and I'm more than happy to engage with her on this matter. I spoke to the advice that we'll be publishing before the end of term in relation to developing the risk assessments for violent behaviour, but also in terms of consequences. That was a key ask coming ahead of the Behaviour Action Plan, a feeling from the profession that there were no longer consequences that they could deploy and be supported with. And I want to be absolutely clear that they should be supported. And of course, we do have exclusion in Scotland schools, and I've been really clear that that can be used, and it is in the gift of teachers to use that as and where appropriate. But to the member's point in relation to effectiveness, of course this is a 3-year action plan and we evaluate the effectiveness on an annual basis. So I'm more than happy to engage with the member ahead of that point. I did engage with the opposition on this ahead of the publication when Mr Kerr was the party spokesperson, and that was very helpful actually on a cross-party basis. And perhaps it would be wise if we reconvene that group on a cross-party basis to look at the action plan in August to talk to some of the issues that Ms McCall has quite rightly raised this afternoon.
Okay, I need a bit more brevity, but Bill Kidd next.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, the member has brought up the important issue of support for teachers. FOI releases, however, show that South Lanarkshire Council, run by Labour, has received over £12 million of Scottish Government funding to reverse cuts to teacher numbers, but they're refusing to use it, and they will end up cutting 65 more teachers. Can the Cabinet Secretary speak to the impact that this reckless decision by Labour will have, and does she agree that councils, including Glasgow and other council areas, should use this funding to support
Cabinet
teachers?
Secretary.
Well, as colleagues will know, and as I think I iterated in my response to Mr Riley, the Government has made £186.5 million available to increase teacher numbers, and we made that deal in good faith with councils through COSLA. And I would expect our councils to uphold their end of the deal. I note that South Lanarkshire Council, for example, is receiving in excess of £12 million being made available to help them do that. And I would hope that colleagues across the chamber, when speaking with their local government colleagues, encourage them to uphold their end of the deal, which was made in good faith. And indeed, of course, in relation to Fife Council in particular, I would specifically, of course, encourage Fife colleagues, of course, to engage with the Labour-run council in that part of the country to ensure that they're not planning to cut any teacher numbers.
And Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware of the case of Carol Shaw, who was violently attacked by a pupil in her school. He lifted her up and threw her headfirst onto a concrete floor, endangering her life. Following the attack, he went to another teacher's desk, put his foot up on the desk and said the stupid cow deserved it. What does the Cabinet Secretary say about that horrifying attack? And when she speaks about consequences, will she have a discussion with the Justice Secretary as to how this individual escaped custody, despite the sheriff in this case saying it could have received 18 months in custody?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I thank Mr Ross for raising this issue. I am aware of the case. Of course, it's received extensive coverage in the press. I think it would be remiss of me to comment on that case specifically today, but I'm engaging already with the Justice Secretary on some of these substantive issues, particularly in relation to some of the press reports we've seen recently regarding knife crime. There is a real need for us to have that joined-up approach in relation to education and justice. I think the First Minister 2 weeks ago spoke about our work in relation to the mentors in terms of violence prevention, and that work is happening in our schools today, and it is good work, but I think there's more that we can do on a cross-portfolio basis to the point the member makes, and I support that point.
Question for Katie Clark.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what it is doing to address violence in schools.
Cabinet Secretary.
As outlined in my previous answer, we are currently implementing our Relationships and Behaviour National Action Plan in conjunction with COSLA. This contains a number of different actions around reducing violence and harm in schools. In addition, since the publication of the Violence Prevention Framework in 2023, we have provided over £6 million to organisations, including the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit and YouthLink Scotland's No Knives Better Lives, to deliver a range of prevention and early intervention activity, and that includes specific work in our schools. Over the coming weeks, we will be publishing new guidance for schools on consequences and on risk assessments for violent, aggressive or dangerous behaviour.
Katie Clark.
In another survey, 8 in 10 respondents conducted among students by the NAS UWT trade union said they had been threatened with assault with a weapon by a pupil in the previous 12 months, and 37% said they had actually been assaulted with a weapon. The Cabinet Secretary has said the Government is working on guidance. Does she think that the action plan is working? And what role does she believe the police should have in helping to address this issue, as often we are told that schools are discouraged from contacting the police, even in serious cases?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for raising an important question. Her question, I think, covers a similar theme to that of Ros McCall's in relation to the impact of the National Action Plan, which, of course, was launched in August. And what I said in response to Ms McCall, I think, will apply to the member as well. I think it's important we engage on a cross-party basis on this point. She also highlights the point that Mr Ross made in relation to the connection between justice and education. And, of course, a number of our schools in Scotland have campus police officers, and there is a connection between justice and education. Quite rightly, I actually often invited the police into my classroom to speak to my pupils in relation to the role of law and order in society. So I'm more than happy to take away the points the member raises today, and on the issue around the action plan, there will be further advice being published in relation to consequences and in terms of violent and aggressive behaviour that I said in response to a previous question.
A couple of supplementaries. They'll need to be brief. First, Marie McNair.
Thank you, President Officer. Violence has no place in Scotland's schools, and I welcome the £2 million additional investment from the Scottish Government to address youth violence and the carrying of weapons in and around schools. And it's clear we also continue to see challenges in misogynistic behaviour and gender-based violence in the wider society. Therefore, can the Cabinet Secretary further comment on the Government's work on this issue and how the Scottish budget delivers upon the priorities of the Equally Safe strategy?
If it is possible, Cabinet Secretary.
We are fully committed to eradicating violence against women and girls. This year we are investing £21.6 million through the Delivering Equally Safe Fund, supporting 115 projects from 107 organisations that focus on early intervention, prevention as well as support services. As part of that investment, we are funding and supporting programmes to address gender-based violence and sexual harassment in our schools. That includes £1.89 million over 4 years to Rape Crisis Scotland to support the implementation of Equally Safe at School and the continued delivery of the National Sexual Violence Prevention Programme. And over the last 10 years, the National Sexual Violence Prevention Programme has reached over 135,000 young people.
And Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. A Freedom of Information request by the Scottish Conservatives have revealed that teachers here in Edinburgh and Aberdeenshire have requested self-defence classes. This is totally unacceptable, Cabinet Secretary, that we are living in a country where our teachers are asking for self-defence classes. Can I specifically then ask, in terms of what's being brought forward by the Government, what will be taken forward by management to make sure that if a teacher requests a pupils not in the classroom, they will not be brought back into that classroom?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I'm sympathetic to the points that the member raises. I think the member is alluding to school management in schools. We need to be mindful of the relationship that local government has as the employer and Scottish Government. But what I'm happy to do on the back of the issue the member has raised today is to take this to ADES, to talk to them as the Association of Directors of Education in Scotland about the point the member makes. And I know that having support from your management team in school is really fundamental to having that support as a classroom teacher in terms of responding to challenging behaviour. So it's an important issue the member raises. I will address it accordingly with ADES.
Question 5, Alexander Burnett.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government when the Children's Minister last met with Aberdeenshire Council to discuss nursery closures.
Minister Natalie Donnan.
As I have explained previously, it is the statutory responsibility of local authorities to manage their ELC estate in consultation with local communities to whom they are democratically accountable. While it would not be appropriate for me to comment on an individual council's processes, I can confirm that senior officials have written to Aberdeenshire Council highlighting the requirements of statutory guidance in relation to mothballing of local authority services. I understand Mr Burnett is keen to take up my previous offer of meeting, and I believe this is now in the process of being arranged and look forward to doing so.
Alexander Burnett.
I'm glad the Minister is aware of a proposal to mothball full nurseries in Aberdeenshire, and there's now a special full council meeting next Monday to make a final decision. But despite numerous questions here, we still appear to be going round in circles, with ministers here saying that consultation is required under the guidance and council officers saying it is not. So it's disappointing, but when I asked the Minister to write to the Council, and this was done on the 30th of May, its contents were not shared with my office. So can the Minister simply confirm now that her letter to the Council confirms what the First Minister and Minister have said in this chamber, and that a consultation should have taken place?
Minister.
I can confirm, as I said in my previous answer, that senior Scottish Government officials wrote to the Council's Director of Education on the 29th of May to draw the Council's attention to the existing mothballing guidance, including the provisions relating to consultation with affected families and communities.
Supplementary, Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Minister will be aware that Aberdeenshire Council is a Tory-run council, and so Mr Burnett should raise the issue with his Tory colleagues. And of course, the Scottish Government is funding local authorities to deliver 1140 hours of ELC to all eligible children, including Aberdeenshire. This policy is crucial to providing the best start in life for our children. So can the Minister provide information on how addressing the Depopulation Action Plan contributes to this objective?
Briefly as possible, Minister.
Absolutely, and I think Ms Mackay raises an extremely important point there. On the challenges, the Addressing Depopulation Action Plan sets out the Scottish Government's strategic approach aimed at supporting local communities facing population decline, of which, of course, childcare is an important driver. We've made grants available to local authorities via this fund, 2 of which contain a focus on addressing childcare issues in areas affected by acute population decline. In Highland, for example, they're examining the workability of subsidised childminding, and in Western Isles funding was granted to pilot new models of training in childcare to bolster employability.
Question 6, Oliver Munn.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to ensure that pupils with additional support needs receive consistent and adequate support.
Cabinet Secretary.
Delivery of ASN continues to be a joint endeavour with local authorities who retain the statutory responsibility for the delivery of education and responsibility to identify, provide for and review the needs of their pupils. We have record investment in relation to additional support for learning, with over £1 billion being spent by local authorities in 23-24. We have continued to invest £50 million each year since 2020 to help schools respond to the individual needs of children and young people, and the 25-26 budget sets out a further £29 million of additional investment for ASN. I've also committed to a cross-party roundtable and a review of ASL.
Oliver Mundell.
The funding set out doesn't match the need. It's another day with teachers reportedly in tears and at breaking point, with a new survey from the NASUWT showing that 70% of teachers say that support for ASN pupils over the past 5 years has declined, and with more than a third saying that they rarely receive the financial support they need to teach ASN pupils properly. This doesn't come as a surprise to me. Something is going wrong, and what is the Cabinet Secretary going to do to change that?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for his question. I thank the member for his question. I met with NASUWT yesterday, where we, of course, discussed at length additional support needs amongst a number of other matters. The member stated that the funding doesn't match the need, but of course I spoke to the investment that has been provided in the last financial year, over £1 billion, and then the additional funding that was put in relation to the budget. And of course I have to observe that the member and his party colleagues did not vote for that budget and that extra funding. So I'm happy to engage with the member on an alternative and what he might think it might be, but it's not less money going into our schools, and the budget provided extra funding.
Brief supplementary, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. Whilst I welcomed the £29 million the SNP Scottish Government invested for additional support for learning, could I just gently remind colleagues that both the Scottish Labour and Tories refused to back that budget, delivering that for education in Scotland? Can the Cabinet Secretary just say how this funding supports the role of local authorities in recruiting for our workforce?
Briefly, Cabinet Secretary.
Well, As I think I've previously set out, local government will receive funding of £28 million from 25-26 to help improve outcomes for all children and young people with additional support needs. And it is also worthwhile recounting that outcomes for children and young people with additional support needs are improving, and that attainment gap in relation to ASN is narrowing. So we are working with COSLA in relation to that investment. We are building on the existing spend in terms of inclusion, and of course there's a further funding that's being provided through the budget to support local and national programmes that are directly going to help support the recruitment and retention of our ASN workforce, and that of course is pivotal to supporting our ASN pupils in our schools.
Briefly, Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And the Cabinet Secretary has again listed inputs that the Government have, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the EIS survey of over 11,000 teachers published this week found that thousands are working the equivalent of an extra day a week, and only 1% of teachers, 1%, said they had sufficient time to support pupils with additional support needs. So can I ask, does the Cabinet Secretary accept that the Government's failure to address the crisis in teaching or address the workload is driving the growing crisis in ASN in schools?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the member claims I did not address output, but of course in my previous response I did talk about output in relation to the narrowing attainment gap with pupils with additional support needs. That is to be welcomed. And of course the budget that I spoke to previously provided extra funding for ASN, and it provided extra funding for teacher numbers. And that was contingent, that budget agreement, on our local authorities agreeing to reduce class contact. Now, the Labour Party abstained on that budget, so the rhetoric from Ms Duncan-Glancy does not meet the reality this afternoon.
Cabinet Secretary.
Not fun.
Question 7, Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the scale of online bullying in Scotland's schools.
Minister.
Bullying of any kind is unacceptable and must be addressed promptly and effectively. Online bullying can take place at any time of the day, whether during school time or after hours, and of course we recognise the impact it can have on a young person. In November we published updated anti-bullying guidance with an increased emphasis on how schools can support young people experiencing online bullying, and together with the Minister for Victims and Community Safety, I'm leading a joint ministerial task force focused on tackling online harms, which will seek to identify what more can be done to protect young people online.
Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Minister, for that answer. Dumfries and Galloway Youth Council is an organisation for and run by young people, and last year it highlighted bullying as one of the top 5 major concerns locally. We know, as the Minister said, that online bullying does not end at the school gates, is often hidden and can cause untold misery for its victims every hour of the day. In response, Dumfries and Galloway Council has announced a review of bullying, with the views of schools, children, young people and parents and carers being taken into account. However, Council's Minister cannot tackle this massive problem alone. So will the Minister therefore commit to ensuring that schools have the resources, both in terms of guidance and funding, to tackle concerns about online bullying? And can she update Parliament on what engagement the Scottish Government has had with the UK Government in order to make sure that social media giants do everything that they can do to protect Scotland's children from online harm?
I think Mr Hoy raises a really crucial point. As he said, online bullying can take place outside of the school gates, which adds an extra level of complexity. I think a lot of actually what we've been talking about in the Chamber this afternoon in relation to tackling violence, supporting our teachers, has a part to play in this. But equally, I think also, as well as ensuring that incidents are recorded, as well as ensuring that children and young people have the confidence to come forward and report these incidents, but also in relation to the work that I'm leading along with Ms Brown, I can confirm the priorities of the Online Safety Task Force are to engage with the UK Government on exactly these matters, engaging with social media and tech companies to try to see a way forward and a better way forward in protecting our children and young people from online harms.
I can assure his members will behave. I'll take a supplementary from Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer. The bullying that occurs online is frequently travelled over the Wi-Fi that's organised by schools. On the 16th of December 2021, I posed this question to the then First Minister, who confirmed that the Scottish Government responses must keep pace with the ways in which young people are subject to bullying, and confirmed that the First Minister and the Government would look at the technical difficulties with regard to Wi-Fi at school being the vehicle that the bullying has occurred. Has the Scottish Government concluded that review, and what is the answer?
Minister.
I believe this would be, in relation to the Wi-Fi in local schools, that would be a matter for local schools and local authorities. However, in relation to the matter that Mr Whitfield has brought to me, I am more than happy to write back to him with more detail on that.
Thank you. Question 8, Ben McPherson.
To ask the Scottish Government how it is working with universities and placement schools to support the mental health and well-being of student teachers.
Mr Graham Day.
You recognise the vital role that mental health and wellbeing support plays in ensuring student teachers can thrive in their professional development. Universities have a responsibility to provide wellbeing services for all their students, including those undertaking teacher training, whilst in placement student teachers are supervised and supported by a registered teacher, ensuring they receive guidance and mentorship to support their growth and wellbeing. Student teachers can also engage directly with the General Teaching Council of Scotland, who provide a range of wellbeing resources and advice to support early careers teachers.
Ben McPherson.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Some constituents have raised concerns with me about the treatment and experiences of trainee and newly qualified teachers and a reported lack of support. It has been stated to me that the GTCS does not conduct exit interviews or gather data on the reasons teachers may leave the profession. Considering all of this, can the Minister advise what actions universities and placement schools should be taking to support student-teacher mental health and well-being? And can any further relevant consideration be given to supporting trainee and newly qualified teachers to help ensure that committed, capable and passionate people remain in the profession?
Minister.
So I set out in my original answer the support that is currently available to support the well-being of students, teachers and early career teachers, and I can confirm that we're currently considering what further support might be provided. I note Ben McPherson's comments regarding the role of the GTCS in this around exit interviews, but of course the employers here are council, so it's perhaps most appropriate it sits with them to carry out such work, and I will ask education officials to ascertain to what extent that is actually happening and whether, as he says, the data is being collated. And I'll undertake to appraise Mr McPherson of progress and the consideration of possible further support.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes portfolio questions on education and skills. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next item of business to allow front benches to change.